when you're talking about 10,000 gallons, that's not cheap and easy to change out. So, yeah, you're talking about trucks, and then you have to, what do I do with the waste oil? Can safety clean buy it? I mean, sometimes they will, sometimes they won't, depending on the oil prices. Yeah, it's better when we start looking at our lubricants as an asset rather than just a maintenance item, and we start treating them as such, it's gonna save us money.
Hello everyone, this is Jesse Zadanek with Dynaway. I'm happy to have you on another episode of Dynaway Dialogues. Today we have Tyler Beckett. Tyler is Vice President of Newton Industrial Solutions. Tyler, you have an engineering background. You've been working in maintenance, reliability, and lubrication for a long time. Working with customers across the world to handle maintenance-based monitoring, condition-based monitoring, and glad to have your experience today. Welcome.
Hey, thank you, Jesse. Yes, I'm very grateful to be here.
Super. So let's jump into it then. I know you have it's kind of a fascinating career, Tyler. You worked as a mechanical engineer. You've worked for some very large organizations. It says when you worked at Henkel, you ran and managed maintenance programs for over 100 sites worldwide. That's a lot of sites in a lot of countries.
That is a lot of sites, yes.
So kind of take us through your background. What got you into reliability, and how did you begin your career?
Sure. So I've always been interested in lubrication. In high school, I had a turbocharged vehicle, and I had some mentors, and a father of one of my friends. He had said, "You need to change your oil every 2,000 miles," and I took that to heart for the turbocharged vehicles because they withstand they have to put up with higher heat and destruction on the oil. Well, then I got wondering, well, okay, what makes a lubricant actually go bad? And then when I got to college, I ended up doing mechanical engineering, which was a great fit. My first job out of college was with Caterpillar. It's there that I kind of cut my teeth with lubrication. I worked for a division called Job Site Solutions. What they did was provide dollar per month or whatever rates for completely managing and leasing machinery to, like, let's say, quarries. And so they would manage all of the uptime, all of the repairs, all of the maintenance that needed to happen, and they would lease the machines to the site so the site wouldn't have to manage all of that. So one of the things we looked into was trying to extend the oil life so that it was a double win for Caterpillar and for the customer, because if we could do that, then the customer doesn't have to have it down as much, and Caterpillar doesn't have to pay the dealer fees and the material fees to have the oil changed. So we put a partial flow bypass filtration system on there and was able to extend the oil change interval from 250 to about 500 hours. So that was kind of my first foray. I'm like, okay, we're on to something. And there was a bunch of research that went in several months before that, and talking to engineers, trying to size piping correctly, things like that, to make sure we didn't starve the engine and the main bearings of oil. And then I went back to school trying to figure out, it's still an exploratory job move. Do I want to go into academia, or do I want to stay in industry? Well, I had a professor that was kind enough to let me, he had an immediate need for someone to come help him on his research. So I said, well, without going through all the motions of trying to do a master's degree, let's go try it out for a little while. And it was great, but the research was kind of like chasing a ghost. It wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. I hadn't found my niche yet. And so I went back into industry, worked for a steel mill for 5 years. There I was able to develop their entire lubrication program. We started from nothing to having 2 lubrication techs and having 165 assets under regularly scheduled oil sampling. And then I really like to do outdoor things, rock climbing, ice climbing, mountain climbing, things like that. And so we love South Carolina too, but where we were living at the time was about 5 hours away from the nearest outdoor and hiking and waterfalls and things like that. So we decided to move up to Greenville.
Okay.
And we got a job with Henkel. I continued the same strides I had done and added on to it. We added ultrasound, we added motor circuit analysis, vibration, laser alignment, and that caught, in addition to the lubrication stuff, and then that caught the attention of the global team. And they said, well, we really like what you're doing here. Can you help us do that everywhere? And I'm like, yes, I absolutely can. So then it was a little interesting because that started in 2019 when I got the global job with Henkel after working at their plant for 2 years in South Carolina. But then COVID happened. And so that first year I was supposed to go to 9 different countries. Well, I didn't go anywhere for 2 years.
Right.
We did our best to manage everything. We actually ended up putting in a whole bunch of CMMS systems, SAP and eMate. So that was that took a lot of our time, and we also tried to make some online training. Online training can be effective, but it's not as effective as in-person communications. But at the time, it was what we had. Then in 2023, I started traveling again, and we went all over the world helping them with ultrasound. I think we visited 28 different plants at the time out of the 140 that we had. And we visited there, and we started a whole ultrasound program where we taught them how to use it, taught them how to take readings, taught them how to find air leaks. That's the main point that we were tracking, but we also taught them how to do steam traps. And so there's mechanical inspection, and then there's airborne inspection. We taught them how to do it all. But through those 28 plants, we were able to find about $1.5 million of savings.
Wow.
And so that was a substantial, and then it kind of puts it in perspective for especially large corporations. If you're looking for something to help jumpstart your condition-based monitoring program and gain the attention of the top-level management, start with ultrasound, because it has the easiest and quickest return on investment. You can take 2 weeks in your plant, and if you have, usually it's my rule of thumb is based on the number of people that work at the site and the CFM. Let's say you have 1,000 CFM. Well, in general, 30 to 35% of that compressed air capacity is going to waste. And so depending on your electricity costs, that's anywhere from $70,000 to $140,000 that you are wasting a year in electricity costs. And when you fix those leaks, then you're not wasting that anymore. So, and you do that across multiple plants, and suddenly you have a whole ton of savings. So after that, they had some organizational changes, and it was time for me to move on. I left Henkel and then worked for UE Systems for a short stint. I was able to learn about sales and that whole process and everything like that. But throughout this whole time, I had looked for the services that we provide today and not been able to find them. So I had to figure out how to do it on my own. But one of our main goals now is to help sites receive these, help give these services to sites that I wasn't able to find when I was a maintenance engineer and a maintenance manager and the engineering leader, those sorts of things. So that's why we exist now, and we're also trying really hard to provide excellent customer service, because I mean, you can find these services in very large corporations, but they don't come with the same level and attention to detail. Like, they don't care about it as if it's their own. It's different. Not saying that you can't get those kind of services from the large corporations, but bringing back the attention to detail and the customer service, that's really why we exist.
Mm, fantastic. Yeah, that's sorely missing in some capacities. So two things I wanted to add that you talked about coming up to South Carolina. I'm not sure our listeners know I also live in South Carolina, so so you were kind of referring to being here closer to where I'm sitting right now.
Yeah.
And also I have to ask you what kind of vehicle was that turbocharged vehicle? What did you have when you were a kid?
It was a Subaru.
Okay.
It was a Subaru, a little 1.8 liter. I think it only had 135 horsepower, but that was up from the 79 it came from the factory. So
Right. I gotcha. Super. Backstories are always fun.
yeah, it was a
Um,
little 87.
yeah, that's awesome. So I'm sure there were some challenges to managing 140 sites. Obviously, COVID threw a huge monkey wrench into that. Were there sort of global challenges, cultural challenges to get people on the same page across uh, borders and across cultures? How did you manage that?
That's a good question. Actually, the answer might surprise you. It was much, much easier to oh, how do I put this in the most honest but kind way possible? When you are in foreign countries, especially those, Caterpillar would call them LRCs, lesser regulated countries, which was a nice way of saying the poverty levels can be quite a bit higher.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take Brazil, for example. Henkel had 2 sites down there that I visited near Sao Paulo. Just across the street from one of the plants was the Las Favelas. Those are, I don't want to say, they are where sometimes you can have less than scrupulous contractors come in and they will build it to about 90% and then just vanish into thin air. Well, then the locals who may not have very good home situations will come in and finish the last 10%. They'll put metal on the roofs. They'll put a cistern up so that they can have running water, a cistern that collects rainwater so they can have running water and things like that. But they're not actually qualified and certified by any government entity as livable spaces. So it's very low income. So you have that situation going on. We really don't have that here in the States. So the guys working at the people, the men and women working at the plants, they really feel, it seems like they feel some sort of pride and ownership over their job, that they really want to do a good job, because then they can own a car, they can rent a nice house in a safer part of town and have children and maybe even go on a vacation during the year. And so, like, when we would ask them to do things, they, all right, we're done training you. Now go and do the rest of the plant, because that's how it worked. We would train them and then spend a day with them, showing them how to do air leaks, and then within 3 or 4 weeks, we would expect that they would have the entire rest of the plant surveyed themselves and then report back to us with the savings. Well, 2.5 weeks they would go by and then they would be done. And they're like, oh my gosh, because here in the States, it was much more difficult. I think it's also a regulatory problem. I couldn't quite put my finger on exactly what it was, but sometimes many of the plants in the States and in higher developed countries, like in the Europe regions, for example, it was very difficult to get them to do the work. They always had something else that was vying for their time. So in the I don't want to call it the third world, but the non-Western countries, we had no problem at all getting them to do these things. They were asking for it. They wanted it. They needed it. And then here in the States, it was, well, we have audits, or we have this going on, or we have this big project going on. We'll get to that. And some of them, they like 6 months later, and they haven't made any progress. That's just how it is, and that's not unique to my previous company. That is kind of how I've seen it through many companies. But the challenge was how do we, and this was also one of the the challenge is how do we make the change sustainable? And so that comes through. You have to make sure you have written work instructions. You can't have people that, Billy, well, he knows how to do that, so we just let him take care of it. No,
Yeah.
it has to be written. It has to be established procedure.
Yeah.
And then you have to put it into a memory generating system, if you will, like, or a paper trail generating system, like a CMMS, or an EAM system. You have to make a yearly PM to perform the compressed gas leak survey, or to quarterly go and grease these certain bearings. That has to be in there. It can't be in someone's head. And then you have to have some way of tracking the progress of it. Like for a bearing, we're tracking mean time between failure, mean time to repair. We're tracking. We're trying for the larger piece of machine. We're tracking OEE. For the air leaks, we're tracking electricity usage and savings potential from fixing the leaks. And then when we do it on a yearly basis, we're seeing, okay, how many leaks that we had last time reoccurred this time, and do we need to do a reliability, an RCA on it, or an RCM? Do we need to figure out, do some root cause analysis why it's happening again? And that's really where, well, that's in my mind why condition monitoring exists. Is not just to tell you early what's going on, but to keep you aware of problems that are especially reoccurring, because we don't want to just fix things. We want to improve them.
Yes.
And sometimes it comes down to, well, the machine wasn't designed well from the factory. Just like we're aware of certain lemon cars that if you're knowledgeable about them, you say, well, let's not buy one of those. Let's buy this other brand over here that's reliable.
Yeah.
You can't maintain your way into a more reliable piece of a machinery without redesigning it. But if you start out with a reliable machine and then you maintain it the way it needs to be, and then you're able to prolong the life of it and extract the maximum value from that asset. And that's why condition monitoring exists, is to help us extract the maximum value from that asset.
Does so now you're kind of in a consulting role and working with a lot of different customers and a lot of different industries. Do you see similarities across industries? Are they totally different, or are there main threads that are similar across industries? How have you seen that pan out in your work, with Newton?
So right now the big thing is I've seen it coming for a while, and we're living through it right now. There's a large gap in technical skills. So what we've got is the baby boomer generation, or those that were born between like 1945 and in the middle of 1960. They are retiring now. Maybe not 1945, maybe a little bit later, but in the 50s and the 60s, they're definitely retiring now. Like for example, one of my customers, they have one person on their team of 10 maintenance guys, or 10 maintenance people that has 20 or more. They have over 20 years experience with the company. The rest of them have 3 or less years experience total, not just with the company, but total. And so that makes it difficult, and especially we find that some of the people coming out of school have mechatronics degrees, because that has been pushed that, robots are the future, robots are cool. Yes, they are neat, but they still find limited application in general industry. With cars and repeatable manufacturing, robots are the thing, like for making car body panels and things like that, for stamping, where it has to do the same thing over and over and over. But for, let's say, like a paper mill, there's not a lot of robotics. Now, PLCs, programmable logic controllers, there's a ton of that, but robotics, not so much. And so what we find is that they don't come out of school knowing the difference between an angular contact bearing and a taper roller bearing, or even the difference between a polyalpha olefin and a group 3 petroleum, and when and where you should use both of those. And so that's kind of where we come in, is we're able to help provide this training. We're working with a few local universities right now to try to help provide this training to the 2-year degree folks before they get out in industry. So the companies are asking for these types of training. They're asking for this knowledge, but because they are not coming out of school with it, then, or they're not coming from their previous company with it, then they teach it kind of on the fly or through their company. Michelin's a big one that comes to mind. Georgia Pacific has done it quite a bit. And then also those services. Okay, we want to increase our lubrication. Well, how do we go about doing that? It's like, where do you start? And that's where I think people can get really hung up, because let's switch gears a little bit too and talk about AI. So that's another really big thing. And this is the point that I want to make, is that with AI, in order for it to be successful, like let's take vibration monitoring, for example. We put sensors on all of our motors, and sometimes it can be sold as a way for companies to get out of a reactive mode or increase their availability of their machinery. Well, it doesn't actually do any of that if you don't follow up on the anomalies and the issues that the system finds. And so if we've got a plant that's already 100% allocated, let's say they have 90% reactive work, 10% proactive work. Well, they're already fully allocated to fighting fires. And so how are they going to have extra time? Because you can't if you have 100% of your time, you can't suddenly have 110. You have to shift that ratio that you've got to make more available time. And so the most successful companies that implement condition-based monitoring are those that have a really strong foundation of maintenance. So we're talking about a good CMMS program. We're talking about a good workflow system. We're talking about very stringent rules on how a work order gets made, or how work gets done. Everyone's hours are tracked. They've got planning and scheduling happening. And when the plants that have that already underway and then put in condition-based monitoring, they're very successful with it. So that's something to keep aware. That's the point that I want to make, is that yes, this AI stuff is very exciting and cool because it eliminates the need for somebody to go around and monitor it on a step function basis, where then it can be monitored constantly.
Yeah.
But it's the follow-up where the money gets made, not on the actual alerts. The follow-up, and where they're able to take, hey, this is going to be a problem in 6 months. Okay, let's fix it today. Well, we don't have time for it. Let's put it, we forget about it. We put it off. It keeps alerting, then it fails all by itself. And then they have to go into a meeting at the end of the year where they're going over all the money they spent. Well, okay, why did we spend $55,000 on this monitoring system? I thought you said it was going to make all the failures go away. Well, then it makes for an awkward conversation that, well, you're trying to explain, well, yeah, it did work. It did what it's supposed to, but we weren't able to follow up. And so it can create some difficulties there.
Fantastic. Well, that's a real, I love the example. That's I see that also out there in the industry, and the companies. Of course, you talked about having a good plan in place, a good system in place to track things. Of course, that's near and dear to my heart, and this sounds like a great next step extension to having maintenance be treated like other parts of the company, where people pay attention, people follow rules, people have a plan in place. So I agree with you there. I do want to ask you though about your certifications and kind of
Sure.
your opinion on it. I see you have your certified maintenance and reliability professional, certified reliability leader, maintenance lubrication analysis level 3, machine lubrication technician level 2. Obviously, that's fantastic. But
Mhm.
for those out here who are listening, what's your recommendation? Did these help your career? Um, should they be something Joe Blow is trying to achieve? How would you recommend companies and employees look at these certifications?
It depends on what you want to do. So in my case, um, I personally, I don't have to be the expert on everything, but when I want to have some background on what they're saying so that I can, um, I can have some greater knowledge on it so that I can just understand it a little bit better. And that kind of
Mhm.
got me into lubrication. I got really interested in it. Um, so for there's really two tracks that you see there. There's a machinery lubrication technician. There is the machinery lubrication analyst. So the technician is more the person doing the work,
Mhm.
actually choosing which lubricants are used, and the analyst is the one receiving the samples or managing the whole program for that. The third level really teaches you everything you would need to know um, if you were to set up your own oil analysis program at your site. Some larger, like mines and really large steel mill companies, they will have an in-house oil analysis lab, but you have to get to about maybe 1,000 samples a month to start making that make sense.
Gotcha.
Below that, it's cheaper and easier to send it out to a lab. Now with the CRL is and the CMRP, they're similar but different. The CMRP is designed as a experience-based certification. And it has 5 pillars of knowledge within it. But it's more of to me, it's more of this is how you should run a maintenance program, and the CRL is more of here are some really good strategies to use on a high level of here's the strategy you use to go after maintenance. And both of them kind of overlap, but that's kind of how they differ. I would not say one really replaces the other or that they're redundant.
Okay.
They both have different strengths and weaknesses to them. Um, now, but as far as the lubrication, there are and there's really 2 governing bodies. There's the STLE, and then there's the ICML. ICML is more geared towards end users and practitioners, where in my mind STLE is more geared towards academia. Like we're talking about the PhDs who are formulating the lubricants and the chemists and things like that that are dealing with the lubricants, not necessarily the end user who is actually making lubrication decisions inside their plant.
Fantastic. So let's dive into lubrication a little bit more since you're the
Sure,
expert there.
sure.
If you had to explain to somebody kind of the value of enhancing your lubrication program, not everyone listening to the podcast is a maintenance manager. So there's some IT people and other types that listen to this podcast. How do you describe it to people? What's the value there, and why should people invest in it?
I love this question. I really do. So remember back when I said a little earlier that ultrasound is the quickest way
Hmm.
to ROI. Well, that's
Yes.
true. But in my experience, the largest ROI is usually with lubrication improvements. So it's typically about 40 to 1, especially with the training. So
Okay.
the lubrication technicians inside of a site are, in my professional opinion, the most important technician you have on your staff, because they have the most power to either make things awesome or really mess some stuff up. Because let's, for example, if they grab the multi-purpose grease gun and start, I'm going to go grease the motors today, and they start putting the multi-purpose grease into the polyurea motors. Well, those two greases are not compatible, and you're going to cause huge problems. Motor shutdowns, bearings aren't going to be happy. It's bad.
Okay.
And then, like, let's say example, hey, we've got a compressor. We have a compressor leak. It says, the bottle says it has 32 oil. Okay, let's go grab some 32 hydraulic oil. Well, did you check what kind of oil it was? They're both 32 viscosity, but they're not compatible. One is a polyalkylene glycol that's in the compressor, and if you put petroleum oil in there, it turns to this snot consistency and ruins everything. It's horrible. So there has to be some knowledge behind there on how things are done, and that's where that 40-to-1 comes from, is you're able to make those decisions and have from a position of knowledge and not actively mess things up. And we really have, it teaches you the 5 rights of lubrication, I like to call it. We have the right lubricant in the right place, in the right time, in the right amount, and the part that I like to add is with the right attitude. We don't want to be doing this work, that's just what the PM says. No, or my boss told me I need to go grease this motor. We want to understand why we're doing it in this method. Why are we giving this motor grease every 6 months? Well, because it runs at these RPMs, at these temperatures, and it needs this amount based on this bearing size and these load calculations and that an engineer has done. And so this is why we have to grease it this way. And then also making it, let's say you have a gearbox and it isn't doing very well, and you're like, okay, we have to limp this along until we have a shutdown, because if at all possible, we have to make this happen. So you can, if you have the right knowledge, you can change the viscosity and change out the oil and keep an eye on it with scheduled oil sampling and do everything you can to try to prolong that life before it has to get rebuilt. Things like that. But what we realize is that lubrication can really reduce the amount of spend we have on our maintenance budget. So for companies out there listening, we can really increase our revenue 2 ways, or we can not a revenue, but increase the money we make at our plant by 2 ways. We can increase our production, but that comes along with more labor, more raw materials, more hours, more maintenance that has to be done because the machines are running more. But I mean, we can still make more money, but that's a lot of work. Or we can reduce the amount of expenses we use to make the same amount of product. And one of the ways we can do that is through optimizing our lubrication. We can figure out that, well, 80% of bearings fail because there's something that we did or did not do lubrication wise to make it fail, or that causes it to fail. So when we understand that from a position of knowledge, we can say it's very easy and quick, once you get into it, to find areas where you can reduce costs. Like, let's say a plant is not doing oil sampling. They're changing their oil every year, which is usually standard practice if you're not monitoring it, because you don't know how it's doing. Well, you start monitoring it, it's not uncommon to see an oil last for 15 or 20 years with keeping it clean and managing the oil sampling and the wear metals and seeing where everything's at and filtering it and things. Whereas, like, especially with larger sumps, when you're talking about 10,000 gallons, that's not cheap and easy to change out.
Yeah.
So, you're talking about trucks, and then you have to, what do I do with the waste oil? Can Safety Clean buy it? I mean, sometimes they will, sometimes they won't, depending on the oil prices. It's better when we start looking at our lubricants as an asset rather than just a maintenance item, and we
Mm-hmm.
start treating them as such, it's gonna save us money.
Wow, that's fantastic. Are there any myths or misconceptions out there that
Huh?
companies are doing things wrong, and you could give them a quick tip?
Um, well, I get this a lot in the trainings. People are like, um, well, I have to change the oil. Why? Well, why? Well, because it's bad. And it's like, well, I have to change my oil in my car every 5,000 miles, 3 to 5,000 miles. Oh, okay. You have to ask yourself, why does the oil go bad? And what makes it go bad? And what limits determine that it is bad? With cars, it's an interesting proposition because it, like, let's say it's $30 for an oil sample, just hypothetically, and then it's like $100 for an oil change. Well, just change the oil. It's the cost benefit isn't really there. But when you're talking about major machinery that costs, it's $50,000 just for a gearbox, and if that goes down, it's like 18 weeks to get another one. And when you're making $200,000 a day at your plant, that's millions, and it shuts down a portion of your line. That's millions of dollars that you stand to lose. And so then it starts. That's why it really hasn't caught on in automotive, consumer automotives, but it's definitely in trucks and mines and things like that. But it's interesting because people, it's like a fourth level. There's 4 levels of knowledge. We know what we know. We know that we don't know things, and things that we don't know that we know. Like, let's say you have $20 in your pocket, you'd forgotten about it, but you didn't know that you remembered, oh yeah, I got 20. Then there's the 4th level that's what we're really trying to combat, is we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And that's the most dangerous part, because we think we're helping things when we're actually hurting things. But if I was to sum it up, most people change their oil more than they should, because the additives and the lubrication technology has gotten so much better, especially over the last 20 years, that they are much better able to handle the situations inside that are happening. But with the caveat that are happening inside machinery. But with the caveat, if you are going to extend your oil drain intervals, you need to do it with a position of knowledge from doing oil sampling. You can't just say, oh, well, I heard from this guy on a podcast that he says we change oil more than we should, so I'm going to let it go for 5 years. Well, don't do that, because you don't know if, and it's, again, you didn't know that they changed the batch from sales, and they said, well, we're going to make this other type of glue in our mixer now. Well, it requires giant chunks of wax, so instead of chopping up all of the wax chunks into little bits for a grinder, because you're like, well, that'll cost more, and that'll eat into our revenue, which it will. They just dump the giant chunks of wax in there. But if the mixer wasn't designed for handling really hard solids, and it suddenly now we're running the new product in there, it comes under much higher load and putting greater strain on the components in the gearbox, then all bets are off. So that's just a real quick example of why if we're extending oil drains, we want to do instead of oil sampling. And then also to add to the value there's a sustainability part too. You can say, well, we have a lower carbon footprint because we're disposing of less lubricant. And
yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, and that's important to today's world. Absolutely. Good. Well, I know we're excited to have you as a speaker, Tyler, at Dynaway Connect this year. And can you share a little bit, hey, what you're going to talk about, what someone can expect to learn in your session coming up in April?
Yep. So we are going to talk about kind of rolling at a high level what it takes to roll out a lubrication program for a site. We're going to talk about tips and tricks. How do once we make things happen, how do we sustain that change? And we're going to talk about how we, just how we approach that and take little pieces of it at a time, and how do we roll it out and make it successful and with lasting change? Because that's really the reason we embark on a new way of changing. We don't like the way things are going, and we have hope, and then that turns into a plan for how are we going to change to get to a better plan. We have a vision, and then we set forth with making a plan, and then we implement the actions, and then we try to sustain the change.
Fantastic. What type of roles, because we have a variety of people that attend Connect, is this a session for maintenance planners or technicians or management? What would you say is the proper role to learn something from your session?
Well, I would say anyone who touches the lubricant, and that's anyone from sales to anyone, not even touches, has anything to do with, so plant managers. It is definitely maintenance focused, but I think it's easy to forget the other people in purchasing, and because that's a big component of it, is the purchasing part. When we have a good supplier that we have set up, even if they are more expensive for the lubricant, when you consider it as an entire whole, it's saving us money because of the value that they can provide as a high-level partner rather than just someone we buy the lubricants from. And I see that happen sometimes, that they have a good relationship set up, that someone comes into a purchasing role in a vacuum because they don't talk to anyone else, say, oh, well, we can get these other lubricants cheaper. Let's buy them from over here. Well, what they don't realize is that they are getting engineering support from their current vendor that is helping them make the right decisions for their machinery. And then when you take that away, unless they have that internally, it can cause deficiencies. But you don't see it right away either, and it's hard to pinpoint because it's definitely a lagging difference, because then they have to use up all the lubricant and switch it over to the new stuff. And
yeah, I can see. That's wonderful. Good. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our episode. I really appreciate you joining, Tyler. I want to remind everyone out there that please subscribe, like, follow on whatever platform you're watching this on or listening to this on. And again, thanks, Tyler, for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at the conference. And that wraps up another episode of Dynaway Dialogues. Goodbye, everyone.
Hey, thank you very much, Jesse. Goodbye.